Thanks to subclassing in the Elder Scrolls Online, you can now build the perfect elementalist to harness the power of fire, frost, and shock magic. In this build video, I'll go over how to set this up on the Subclassing Dragonknight, but you can make this work on the other two classes I've picked here as well, and it feels fantastic. We're talking about insane survivability and self-healing, along with infinite sustain and a very easy rotation through elemental dots that literally rip your enemies to shreds. So if you like the idea of combining all three elements into one, then this is the build for you. So let's jump right into it. All right, everybody, here we are back on another build for subclassing in the Elder Scrolls Online. This time we're taking a look at the Dragonknight with my version of an elementalist build. So using fire, shock, and ice magic in a pretty strong setup. So let's go ahead and jump into the buff stats here. And you'll see a few of our abilities as well. Let's see, I think that should about do it. So taking a look at the buff stats here, we got about 31k max magicka, 25k max health, 18, almost 19k max stamina. Our recoveries are fine. We're going to be weaving in heavy attacks, so recoveries are a non-issue. We've got good damage, good crit chance, and penetration, as well as armor on this setup because we're pulling in lots of different buffs from different skill lines thanks to subclassing, so it works out pretty nice, especially for soloing. As a magicka build, of course, we have 64 points into max magicka, running the Thief Mundus to increase that critical chance. We are also running Bewitched Sugar Skulls because we have plenty of sustain from doing heavy attacks. So we want to take advantage of the max resources there. And then a lot of different buffs here. You'll see where we get those when we take a look at the skills in just a few minutes. In terms of potions, I have a Tri-Stat potion right now active. That's going to be best for like more difficult content. But if you're doing more easy stuff, then the max magicka potion is completely fine. Or just, health potion. You can run armor potions as well. I'll try to have some different options listed in the written guide. Last but not least, in terms of the race, you can see we have Khajiit here, which is a nice option for the critical damage and critical healing due to Feline Ambush that runs really nicely on this build. But other magicka-focused races, such as High Elf and Dark Elf, would be amazing choices for this build as well. I think that covers the basics, so let's go ahead and jump into the gear sets next. We're starting this build off with Deadly Strike, and that's mainly because we have tons of dots, damage over time effects on this build, as well as a channeled attack, that being our Lightning Staff heavy attack. So Deadly Strike is a really nice set. It basically buffs everything that we do in terms of damage. It also gives us nice 2 through 4 piece bonuses. So the way I've decided to run this for this build is we're doing the Deadly Lightning Staff here, with a precise trait with a shock glyph. That will count for 2 pieces since that is a two-handed weapon. Then we have Deadly Strike on the chest, Divine's max magicka there, and then just 2 pieces on the jewelry. So Deadly Rings here with a weapon and spell damage enchant with Bloodthirsty. You do want to change the trait on these because these come in Robust, which is stamina, which is not really going to help this build very much. So that again is our first set, Deadly Strike. Really nice option because again, it just basically buffs everything we do in terms of damage. Second 5-piece set here, I've chosen Runecarver's Blaze, and this is just a really nice damage over time set. I wanted to use this since we are running so many dots on this build. It basically buffs all of them with some extra flame damage every third tick, and that damage does scale up with your weapon and spell damage when you're fully buffed. It gives us some additional offensive penetration, weapon and spell damage, which is fine really for soloing content especially. But yeah, this was really nice in terms of what it added to the overall damage with those dots getting the extra buffed flame damage thanks to this set. Now, it's not required. There's plenty of other sets you can run here in place of Runecarver. I'll have more of those listed in the written guide. If you want to check that out, link is in the description down below as well as the pinned comment. But this is a light armor set, so it does work out pretty well in terms of the passives. You want to get this all Divines if you can, and then obviously max magicka for the enchant. And we're just running this on 5 pieces, of the body. I figured that would be the easiest for you guys to get because this is a dungeon set, so it would require a little bit of farming. But we're basically running the feet, the legs, the hands, the waist, and the shoulder. And again, Divine's max magicka for all 5 pieces of that set there. You can see we have a couple pieces left over. I've got a heavy slime craw here. Heavy is nice for soloing just to maximize your resistances. Also get a bit of extra stats due to the Undaunted passives. You do want to enchant this with Max Magicka though. Make sure you get Divines. Slimecraw is nice still just for the extra bonus crit chance. It is a little bit less than it has been in the past, but it's literally like half a percentage point of crit chance, so it's really not a big deal. I am still using this set on lots of builds still, but you can substitute it for other things. Like Iceheart is another set that, gives 1-piece crit chance. As you can see, we're not running the full monster set. We actually wanted to make room for a mythic here, and there's multiple choices that you can run on this build. Now for me, Sea Serpent's Coil felt really good in terms of just overall tankiness and as well as extra damage. You can see what this does here for the mythic. When you're at full health, you gain 40% damage reduction, which is actually pretty impressive. And then once you take damage, you actually get 2 really nice buffs that we don't have access to otherwise. Major Berserk and Major Courage. So that's 10% bonus damage done and a lot of extra weapon and spell damage. Now it does give you a bit of a snare here, so I have some strategies against that in terms of champion points. Really, it's not bad unless you know there are some really crazy mechanics that you need to get out of. The slow on this is really manageable. But yeah, this is what I'm preferring right now. Now, of course, if you want to play a little bit safer, if you want a little bit more healing, you can actually swap in something like the Ring of the Pale Order. That'll give you obviously more healing, passive healing, a lot of it from all of our dots, but you'll have less damage and less damage reduction there from Sea Serpent. So it's up to you. You can also run this completely without a mythic, and to do that, you would run 3 pieces of Deadly here. The Deadly Necklace and 2 rings, as well as the Lightning Staff, and then you could run the monster set of your choice. I would recommend for soloing something like Iceheart. That's gonna fit the Elementalist theme really well on this build. You could also run Zon for a bit of fire damage, a little bit of extra damage on this build too. So like I said, I'll have all those options in the written guide. Feel free to check that out. Link is down below. And then one more thing before I forget, Backbar Maelstrom Staff. This is just nice for a little bit of extra damage on your Wall of Elements. Plus, you'll want Infused as your trait with the weapon and spell damage glyph to maximize that buff. All right, moving on to the skills next, and this is where things get a lot more interesting with the Elementalist setup. As I said, we actually started as a Dragonknight on this build, and that really makes sense for anything that you want to do a lot of fire damage with. Basically, everything here does fire damage, and it's a pretty good skill line overall. What I like about this, especially for solo builds, you guys, is it has a good combination of damage and healing. For example, Burning Embers, that's a dot that also gives you a ton of health back. Engulfing Flames actually gives you bonus damage for your fire abilities, which is pretty cool. And then Cauterize, you can run this for more healing. It actually has changed to heal every 3 seconds, which is quite good. We're actually combining this with other heals as well from other skill lines. But if you don't need the healing, if you're running something like the Pale Order Ring, well, then you could just do the other morph here, which is Flames of Oblivion, for even more damage. And yeah, you can run Whip, you can run Standard of Might. I've run those on different versions of the build. I'm not using them right now, but those are equally good options. So Ardent Flame, that's our Dragonknight base. By the way, you do not have to be a Dragonknight on this build. I'm not using any class sets or any class scripts. So any of these 3 classes, if you want to try to make this build, it'll work completely fine. Next skill line, probably obvious choice, is going to be Stormcalling. And this is so good, you guys, especially if you want to play in solo content. Due to having Crit Surge, you get your passive healing over 3k per second. When this crits, it's a lot higher. And so this is just great for survivability. It also gives you Major Brutality and Sorcery, so you have your damage buff taken care of as well. We're also combining that with the armor buff, Boundless Storm. It is kind of hard to get a good armor buff when subclassing, especially if you're focused on more damage or, solo-friendly skill lines. So the fact that you get this and Critical Surge together in one skill line, pretty awesome for solo content. That's why it's a really good skill line to pick. But anyways, this also does shock damage, gives us that Major Resolve buff and a little bit of extra movement speed. You can throw in skills like Liquid Lightning on the back bar for even more shock damage. You could do Mage's Fury as an execute. Also, the passives here are quite nice with the way we've set this up, especially Energize for more shock damage, Amplitude for overall damage based on missing health. We're not really using Expert Mage, but you could if you wanted to slot something like Power Overload on the front bar. That's a pretty strong ultimate as well once you have 500 ultimate built up. But then our third class line, remember I'm going for the Elementalist combo here, so I've got Fire, Shock, and Gravelord's actually going to give us our Frost Magic skill. Now, why Gravelord instead of Warden's Winter's Embrace? I'm sure many of you are asking right now. Well, a couple of reasons. One really is the passives are good for this type of build, which remember it's a solo build with a dot focus. So we've got Death Knell, that's giving us a massive 20% crit strike boost in execute range. We've got Dismember, which is giving us bonus penetration, really good for soloing. And we also have Rapid Rot, which is a 10% bonus to all damage over time effects. Okay, not only that, since we are so dot heavy, I was able to add Gravelord's Sacrifice, which this buffs necro skills, but it also buffs all damage over time effects. That includes, your lightning staff heavy attacks. That includes those Dragonknight fire dots. Okay, so this is actually really an important part of the build. It lasts a long time, very cheap to cast, so it was awesome to add to this one. On top of that, we have Unnerving Boneyard, which is a frost damage ability that gives AoE major breach and minor vulnerability. Yeah, you could run, the poison morph here, noxious breath, but that didn't really fit the theme, right? Gravelord gave me the frost magic. It gave me an extra debuff in minor vulnerability, gave me the AoE breach too. So yeah, this was really good. And then Glacial Colossus, great ultimate for soloing especially. I like how this is low cost. It's a much more low cost than the Dragonknight ultimates are. It gives you a nice stun and then also applies major vulnerability for a massive 17 seconds. That's a huge debuff. It really helps to speed things up when you're soloing. You can even run, if you want to be a little bit more advanced, you can run Mystic Siphon, which also does shock damage, gives you a bit of extra recovery and bonus damage done. So there's actually quite a lot here. You can even run Flame Skull, Ricochet Skull that does flame damage. That would be a nice option if you don't have access to scribing. But yeah, there's a surprising amount of good elementalist style skills here, and it just was giving me more than I was getting from Winter's Embrace for the Warden. I did try both, but I feel like Gravelord, especially if you're playing solo, that's the way that you want to go on this elementalist style build. So that's the skill lines. Again, quickly, just the setup here. You've got Burning Embers and Engulfing Flames. Those are Dragonknight skills. You've got Gravelord's Sacrifice for that 20-second dot bonus. We have some other interesting skills here. So Revealing Flare is actually an Alliance War skill that sometimes I run on solo builds because it gives you passive major protection. That's a 10% damage reduction on any incoming damage. It's really nice for soloing combined with our other abilities. You don't even have to cast this. You don't have to morph it and waste any skill points. It's just free damage reduction. Now, if you don't have that, there's several other things you could run here. For example, you could put Inner Light for more Max Magicka. That's coming from the Mages Guild skill line. As I said, you could run Shocking Siphon from the Necromancer's skill line. Actually, the morph is called Mystic Siphon. This is just going to add a little bit more challenge to the rotation. So I kind of felt like it wasn't worth it, but definitely does add more damage. So that's something you can consider if you want to be a little bit more advanced. But yeah, pretty much I'm just going for the easy mode version of this, which is going to be Revealing Flare, again, for that bonus major protection. We've got Ulfsild's Contingency from the Scribing skill lines. I've set this up as a damage shield, as well as a heal over time, as well as minor force. That's a really nice option. If you don't have access to scribing, then what I would do there instead, you could do Structured Entropy for an extra heal over time. And really, one of the reasons why we want to run a Mages Guild skill here and cast it is for this passive. Might of the Guild is giving us Empower, which increases our heavy attack damage against monsters by 70%. So you have either option there. Contingency is better with the scripts that I've chosen for sure. And then Front Bar Ultimate, this is just passive damage reduction. Again, Temporal Guard comes from the Sigic Order skill line. It's giving us passive minor protection. So we've got minor and major protection passively on the front bar, which is really nice. We're getting a bonus damage shield here anytime that we block, which is kind of cool. You can combine that with the contingency shield and be pretty good here, defensively at least. You can see we even get that heal over time running, which is awesome. Back bar here really quickly. We've got Blockade of Storms. Of course, that comes from the Destruction Staff. You'll want this mainly to proc your back bar glyph, as well as help set enemies off balance. Then we've got Cauterize. This comes from the Dragonknight Ardent Flame skill. Again, if you feel like you have enough healing, if you're running Ring of the Pale Order, you would morph this to Flames of Oblivion for even more damage. Next up, we have Unnerving Boneyard for those two buffs, as well as the frost damage. And then our two sorcerer buffs, which are really key on this build. We've got Boundless Storm for armor, as well as shock damage, and then Crit Surge for our buff, as well as our passive healing every 1 second. And then our back bar ultimate, just going to be Glacial Colossus. We already talked about how good that is. So that's the setup. Again, lots of different options here, honestly, for the Elementalist style build. I had a lot of trouble deciding on what to use, but this is what I came up for solo content. Again, check out the written guide link down below if you want to see all the alternate skills I talked about as well. Rotation here, I've tried to keep it very simple. In terms of buffs, Gravelord Sacrifice, buff that on the front bar. Back bar, make sure you have your Sorcerer Armor and Crit Surge on the back bar, and then you just have your 3 dots that you need to maintain or cauterize if that's the morph that you chose here. So those 3 skills on the back bar. Then on the front bar, you can heavy attack between abilities, like your Burning Embers, your Breath there. Keep Gravelord active, and then cast your shield when you have nothing else to cast, basically. Okay, so one more time, here's our back bar. Dots. Keeping our Sorcerer buffs up. Drop your ultimate, of course, if you have it. And then heavy attack in between those front bar dots. You want to maintain your contingency too for the Empower. And then Gravelord Sacrifice one more time. So remember, the Empower only lasts for 10 seconds, so you want to cast Contingency a little bit early. And you do get the free damage shield too, so you'll be using it a lot more in actual content than you would on a dummy, for example. If you get off balance, try to stay on the front bar. That's going to help your heavy attacks do even more damage. But you can see my sustain is really good. Don't really even need a potion at all. And if all of your abilities are good, you can recast Burning Embers for a nice burst heal and a little bit more upfront damage. We're getting close to the end here, so just make sure you maintain your buffs. Again, drop your ultimate as soon as it's ready. Keep up those Dragonknight dots, and you're pretty much good to go. All right, champion points next. Let's go ahead and check this out. As usual, I'll have this detailed in the written guide for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 champion points, so make sure to check that out. But in terms of just the slotted stars that I'm taking, usually for Green Tree, I'll start with Steed's Blessing and then work up to Master Gatherer, Gifted Rider, and then Warmount. For the Blue Tree, since we are weaving in a lot of heavy attacks, you'll want to pick up Weapons Expert. That's over here for a 20% bonus heavy attack damage done. That's actually really powerful. You can also pick up Deadly Aim. That's going to increase your dot damage with single target dots. Also, your heavy attack lightning staff ticks get buffed with this. You can also put on Thaumaturge, obviously, since most of our skills are damage over time. Then the 4th slotted star here that I picked up was Fighting Finesse for 8% bonus, critical damage and critical healing. Also, don't forget to pick up your passives here, especially Preparation under Staving Death for 10% bonus damage reduction. This build feels really tanky, even in mostly light armor. In terms of the red tree, you can start over here, Fortified and Boundless Vitality. You can skip out on Rejuvenation. We don't really need the recovery with the Lightning Staff Heavies woven in. But then you can also pick up Bastion for a little bit of extra shielding if you're using Contingency, as well as Celerity. This is inside the Wind Chaser tree. That's going to give you 10% bonus movement speed at all time, which is really nice for heavy attacking or when Sea Serpent procs. Now, in terms of the outfit style, in case you're curious, this is actually a costume, I believe. Yeah, this is Antiquarian Field Garb with just the black and gold dye, and then the Meridian Purified skin. So that's going to wrap up this build video. Don't forget, though, that we have a written guide with all the alternate skills, gear, passives, champion points listed, and much, much more. Just grab the link for that down below. And if you're liking the new subclassing builds, we're also creating even more for our Tier 2 channel members called the Elite Squad, like our Unkillable Druid build, which combines powerful fire and lightning magic with animal companions to fight by your side. I've been having a ton of fun with this build recently too, because it just feels like a brand new class, a fully functioning Druid in ESO. Members of our Tier 2 Elite Squad can unlock this build right now, along with dozens of other members-only builds and guides. So if you're interested in supporting the channel, that's a really easy way to do it, and you get a truckload of bonus content, not to mention early access to videos and members-only Discord. Just make sure to select the Elite Squad option if you're interested, and to get started, just click on the Join button down below or the membership link in the description to see our complete library of members-only builds and guides. Huge shout out, as always, to our channel members who make this channel possible. I truly could not do what I do without you, so thanks again. And thanks to all of you for watching this video. I hope you're doing well, stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next one.